happy Sunday and happy June. June, month 6. I am your host, Camilla Francis, and welcome to Let's Talk About You. We have a great show, and this show is because of you, my viewing audience, that you guys had questions and you wanted more of it. So we're going to give you what you want, and that's what this is about. So thank you, thank you. But before we jump into it, let's say thank you to our sponsors, Infinitely Me and Kiki Creations. Infinitely Me have so much I want to say thank you to Infinitely Me. Did you guys see that new merchandise? Please make sure you check out Kirsten's Brun website and see what's new with Infinitely Me. Our next sponsor is Kiki Creations, and we're just showcasing upcoming events, recent events that were done by Kiki Creations. And I want to say thank you to them as well for sponsoring Let's Talk About You. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you. Thank you. And now we're getting into the time and the topic of the day, surviving loss and what's next. Back with us. Thank you so much, ladies. Pastor Kimberly Rodriquez and Don Jeffries. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Don, come into the room.
Hi.
Thank you for saying yes once again.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hi, Pastor Kimberly. Welcome to Let's Talk About You.
Thank you. Glad to be back. Thanks for having us back, everybody. We're excited.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank our listening audience for reaching out and say that it was so touching. And I know that we had a behind the scenes. And after our behind the scenes, I was telling you ladies how emotional and full I was. I got that feedback from other audience members, viewing audience, how full they were based on the conversations that were had. So thank you. And thank you for coming back right away. So I know that one of the things that we spoke about is loss. And I know everyone has suffered some type of loss in one way or the other. And I'm not going in any specific order, but I want to talk about loss in. Let's talk about loss in employment because there are different types of loss. And I know we both have suffered that. So let's talk about that. What were the early signs in the relationship that you saw things may have not be continuing, or there were trouble, or if you saw any of that? Let's start with you, Don.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat? And I need to apologize up front. My dog are not paying attention. I'm going to talk to you. I apologize.
So do you? My question was, what led up to? I know we both have had job loss. Before that occurred, was there anything that showed you that something led up to that? Was it a surprise? You saw it coming?
Okay. I guess I had three forms of loss within a year and a half time frame. I got divorced, and yes, I absolutely saw that coming. Um, it was a necessary thing, you know, even though it was difficult and it was painful. It was a necessary, and the warning signs were there, and took years for me to actually get to that point. Um, then when I lost my son, almost a year to the date of my divorce, it was a shock in that moment, but it was not a surprise altogether, because he had been depressed, he'd been struggling. He was a disabled veteran, Army veteran, got injured, and the injuries that he sustained, you know, were going to be life altering. They weren't going to be anything that he was going to be able to come back from. And he started to see the progression, and I'm confident that that was part of what fed into the decline. Um, but of course, as
Was
with
that the decline in which decline? I'm sorry.
it was an emotional and mental and even spiritual decline. Um, he felt abandoned, you know, by God, and he spoke about that, and it was something that we prayed on. In the end, I know that he reconnected and regained his faith, and I'm grateful for that. But he struggled. He struggled. He was on medication. He was he was in therapy. He was going to the doctors pretty frequently, but life was lifing. And, you know, he got involved in a toxic relationship, which also messed with him emotionally. And it's just one of those things. I realize that when we're struggling, especially with mental health, it doesn't really matter how many people we have around us who love us. Um, it's inside. So if you're battling, if you're struggling, only you really understand what it is that you're struggling with and what it is that you're battling. And you can reach out for help. Definitely reach out for help. Because you can't sleep it away, you can't eat it away, you can't exercise it away. You need help. And sometimes not only clinical, but pharmaceutical. You know, that you need those things. But I would say for those who have lost loved ones, you need to know that there's really nothing that you could have done to change it. You could not have made it not happen. Well, if only I had called, if only I had gone to see them, if only I had said this, then maybe they would not have done that. For my son, I was on the phone with him for 3 hours straight as he was going to the VA to get help. I was on the phone when they discharged him from the VA. I talked to him exactly 1 hour before he took his life. 1 hour before I was on the phone with him. And our last words to one another were, "I love you." He said, "Mama, I got to go." And I said, "Okay, baby, you know that I love you." And he says, "I love you too. I'll call you back." I fell asleep on the couch. I was awakened, literally jolted out of my sleep at about 8:15. I called him. His phone went straight to voicemail. Death certificate reads 809.
My heart just aches because that's my god baby, and you could just pace yourself if any of this is too much for you to handle. But you know you're right. As things go on, it's hard for us to determine what the other person is going through, and there's always a sense of guilt, but you should never feel guilty for. And I know that moment must have been hard when you got that other phone call after you couldn't reach him.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't a phone call. It was a knock on my door. Um, at about, so we later found out that it was right around, 8 o'clock. But at about 11:30, my doorbell rings. I'm thinking, who in the world is ringing my doorbell 11:30 at night? And so I go check my cameras because I wasn't going to the door. There was a police officer on my porch. Now I'm gonna tell you, the first thing that went through my mind is, do I have enough money in my account? What am I gonna have to do? What did he do? And how do I get him? What do I do? And so, I went to the door and the gentleman asked me my name. The officer asked me my name, and I told him my name. And he says, ma'am, do you have a son who lives, in Dallas? I said, yes. And he said, can you tell me his name? I said, Caleb Stewart. He said, ma'am, I hate to inform you that your son took his life earlier this evening. And I'm looking at him like, why are you punking me at 11:30 at night? Like, why are you on my porch? Like, for real. And, he said, ma'am, could you open the door? Because, I want to be able to be with you. And I'm thinking, and I remember I kept looking at him like, why are you on my porch? Like, why are you here? And I eventually let him in, and he made me call a friend. He was like, I need you to call someone. I need someone to be with you. And I just kept thinking, why? Because I'm fine. And he's looking at me like, no, you are far from fine, and you don't even know it. And the funny thing is, I was very, very close with my son. Like, very close. Like, we would wake up in the middle of the night and be like, something's wrong, and call each other. So what I had to do in that moment was just kind of block him out, block everything out. And I just stood in the middle of the room and I just whispered a prayer. And in that moment, I felt it. I was like, he's no longer here. Okay. And, there's stages of grief, and they, there's no order that they go in. There's no order. And you can be stuck in one or two stages at a time for a long period of time. And you can recycle through all of the stages. One of the stages is denial. I don't think I ever went through denial because, he used to talk about this. We had those hard discussions, and I really challenge everybody. Have those
hard discussions that you have.
Yeah, we had discussions about. He knew that he was sick. He knew that he was injured. He had a spinal injury, and so he had neuropathy, and so he was losing feelings in his hands and in his feet. And he would tell me things like, "Mom, if anything ever happens to me and they have to put me on life support, don't you leave me on life support." And I was like, well, and he's an Army medic. And I was like, well, sometimes, life support just kind of helps you to catch your breath, for your body to kind of restart. And he says, yes. He said, but it shouldn't take weeks, months. He said, do not. He says, if I wake up and I'm on life support, we're going to have words. I was like, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. He wanted me to know, like, if I get sick, don't go through any heroic measures. Just let me go, because he knew that it was going to be a decline. He knew that it wasn't anything that, in the natural, he was going to bounce back from. He knew that it was going to be a progressive decline. So, we also had the discussion. He wanted me to know that, he wanted to be a donor. He let me know that. I don't think he had that on his license. So we had to make sure that, they knew that. He also wanted me to know that, it was his desire to be cremated. He didn't want, to be in a box. He did not want to go on. He was like, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, cremated. So we had those discussions.
Some of these discussions that you had with him, was this generally discussions that, because everyone finds it very hard to talk about what's next after death. You don't want to talk about your even your parents preparing for their preparing us for when they're no longer here. And you had a challenge of having conversations and discussions with your child, because no parent wants to be the one to say goodbye.
No,
No parent. No parent.
no,
No parent.
no.
And so, was this just general conversations you guys would have
Yes,
about what's next?
yes, yes. And part of that came from the fact that so both of my parents have health issues. You know, they've got kidney issues. And both of my parents have had health scares, and where the doctors told us they're not going to live. And so, and then their paternal grandmother also had a lot of health issues. So what ended up happening was that was what led way to begin the discussion of, you know what, with all this stuff going on, I need you all to know what I want you to do. I need you to know what my desires and my wishes are. And so then I just came right out and asked him. I was like, well, I said, well, God forbid anything would happen to either of you, because y'all not going anywhere before me. So just tell me, like, what would you want to have happen? Now, that's really hard. It
Yes.
is. It's very, very hard. And for me, what made it a little bit easier is my background. I have a social work and public health background. So with my background, I had to address these issues. I had to do it as part of my education. I was also challenged to describe myself without using the titles mother, wife, daughter, sister. That's another really tough challenge, because
True. So these discussions that you guys had, and the reason why I'm really trying to get to the nitty gritty of it, because, even this morning I was having a conversation with my daughter about, God forbid anything was to happen to me, because it's just me and my dad living. And, he is a vital, vital 96-year-old, and he doesn't want to use the cell phone. So what would be the point of contact? Because anything can happen. So we were actually coming up with a system.
Yes.
And I was like, I know you don't want to have discussion. And she's like, no, I don't. But you know what, Ma, you're right. We need to have these discussions. And I know that this topic that we're having here today, talking about loss and what's next, it's a very hard conversation, especially because both of our guests have had loss, both one losing their child and the other losing their parents, and both lost relationships through to divorce. But as hard of these conversation and this discussion is, it is something that needs to be had. Absolutely. Because we need to know what to do. Absolutely. And you're talking and my heart is just palpitating, because I feel like I don't know what you went through then, but I can see it again.
And we went so far as, my children and I, to make sure that we were in one another's phone. My daughter is the one that came up with that. She was like, we need to go into our notes or somewhere and list who our emergency contact is.
Yes.
And there's a way that when you enter someone in your phone, like on my phone, I have the iPhone, when my daughter's profile pops up, she pops up as my emergency contact. And so I was Caleb's emergency contact. And so my information was in his phone. But yeah, it was hard. And every time we had the conversation, I was emotional. My babies are a lot stronger than me when it comes to that. I'm the emotional one. I'm the emotional one. And but I knew that we needed to have those discussions, because I have had friends who've lost parents, and they were absolutely like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to begin. I don't know what the next step is. And it's a rude awakening when you get to the funeral home and you're having to do the plans, and they're asking you, oh, well, what would you like to do? Do you want, you're like, well, what do you want the casket to look like? Or what do you want the urn to look like? And it's best that you have it written down somewhere, because all reason goes from the mind. I mean, I'm sitting there in the room and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, I just immediately, my body just started shaking, because it was just like I was having an out of body experience. And it's definitely something that you want to discuss. It is a hard discussion to have, but the time is going to come where we're not going to be here, because tomorrow isn't promised to anyone.
Today isn't promised. So
Today isn't promised.
I know that you brought up some good points about, and Caleb is always with us. But when you decided to have that discussion, and because it was something that needed to be had, was it something that you said, okay, let's talk about it tomorrow? Or was it, okay, Ma, it's time, and you guys were ready to it because you decided we had persons in our family who are ailing and this is something we need to talk about?
I'm just going to be transparent here. No, that's not how it came up. How it came up is my children tell me I drive Miss Daisy. I'm driving Miss Daisy because I'm the slow driver. And, we were having this discussion one day, and we were like, Ma, you stay out of the left lane because somebody will hurt you. You need to be over in the right lane, and maybe you can drift to the center lane, but you need to stay out of that left lane. Just stay out of it. So we were having this discussion, and we were driving. I was driving with my son, and there was something in the road, and I slowed down. Like I saw a pothole or something coming, and I slowed down. Now, mind you, I'm in the middle of the road, to the point where I almost stopped to go over this hole. My son looked at me. He said, "What did you just do?" I said, I'm slowing down. He goes, "Mom, somebody gonna ram you in the back. You can't stop like that. You just need to go over it and keep going." So we're having this discussion, and he said, "You know what? I'm gonna need you to put some pep in your step when you're driving." And I said, "Well, what am I supposed to do? Drive like you? You driving like Mario Andretti. I'm not trying to drive like you." He said, "What's wrong with you driving fast? Like, let's get to the bottom of this. What is really, like, what is scaring you so much?" I said, "I don't want to crash." And he said, "Oh, so you're afraid of dying." And I was like, I said, well, yeah, I don't want to die. I said, "Aren't you afraid of dying?" And he said, "No, I'm not. I can go tomorrow and I'll be all right." And that's when I went, whoa, wait a minute. That's not how we're talking. Like, what are you talking about? I said, "Okay, wait a second. What you mean you could go tomorrow and you would be okay? Is there something that I need to know? Like, is there something going on? Like, what's going on in your head?" And so, he said, "Look, I drive so that if I do crash, there is no chance of me being a vegetable." He's like, "That's not going to happen. When I go, I'm going to go." So, and then he had discussions too, like, because of the fact that, he was in the Army and he was a medic. There was something, we were watching a show, and somebody, I don't remember what they did. I don't know if they cut their wrist or whatever, but he said that's an outcry. They weren't really serious about, leaving this earth. And I said, "Well, why would you say that?" And he said, "If you're serious about leaving this earth, you make sure that there's no chance that you're going to survive it." He said, "You put a bullet to the head." He says, "Not in your mouth, he said, "You put the bullet straight to your head so that there's no chance of you coming out of it." And I used to tell him, you've been watching the wrong shows. Like, I'm gonna need you to stop. But, and he would tell me, "Mom, I'm serious. Like, you need to, like, no."
So then you realized that was him, a cry for help?
I realized it was a cry for help because he said it one too many times. And then there were times when he would be having a moment, and he would get emotional, and he would call me, and he would be in tears, and he would say stuff like, I just need to go ahead and just put a gun to my head and end it all. And I'd say, baby, no, 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 no. That's what we're not going to do. What we're not going to do is give up. We're not going to do that. But then after that conversation, God had a conversation with me, and he had to let me know, you need to talk to your child, because you need to understand like where he's coming from, what's really going on with him. You need to have the hard discussion. And so then when he was in a calmer state, I talked to him about it, and I said, have you ever really considered taking your life? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, can you tell me some more about this? So he was in group therapy, he was in individual therapy, he was on medications. But he basically told me he would always share with me, and he would always be honest with me. But there were certain things that he really didn't want me to know, because he felt that I wasn't going to be able to handle it, or that I was going to stop him, or I was going to try to stop him. And so the day that it happened, he had gone on a job interview, and he called me at work, and I was 2 weeks on the job. He called me at work, and he was telling me about his interview, and he was debating because it really wasn't a good fit for him, but he was trying to get out of where he was. And so we were discussing the pros and cons of whether or not he should take this new job. And so then he said, well, Mom, I know you're at work, and, it's a new job and everything. I'm going to let you get off the phone, and I'm going to talk to you later. And I said, okay, babe, I'll talk to you later. He called me an hour later, crying. And he asked me, how do I get rid of someone that I know is no good for me, but then I still love them? Like, how can you do that? So I could hear the pain in his voice. So we had a conversation. And at this point, I was in the office by myself. So I just talked to him, and I let him speak. And I prayed with him. But I could tell that in that moment, he was distraught, but he was looking for answers. Like I don't believe in that moment he had made up his mind.
But he was crying out and trying to
But
ask
he
for
was
your help.
crying out, and he was asking. And what's interesting, I forgot to mention this. The night before, and I didn't even think about this until after it happened. The night before, he called me up, and he goes, Mom, he goes, I got a question for you. He said, don't go reading anything into it. I don't want you freaking out on me. I'm just asking you a question. I said, okay, what? And he said, if anything were to happen to me, would you be able to take Bia and Tachi, his dog and his cat? And, I didn't even process. Baby, I already have a dog. I can't imagine. I was like, no, but I'll help you find a home for him. I said, I'm allergic to cats, so I definitely can't take Tachi. And so we just had this conversation. And I said, why? What's wrong? Are you moving somewhere and you can't take him? He goes, I told you, I'm just asking a question. I said, okay.
So even, I mean, with all of this, that he was giving you telltale signs of the internal pain, but you did what your part with making sure that he had therapy and so forth.
Making
I
sure
want
that
to bring Kimberly in the conversation. With regards to having that hard conversation, was that one of the many things that you've had with your parents before they passed? I'm not hearing you for whatever reason. Okay, I guess something is happening with her audio. So go ahead and proceed, Don.
um yeah, like I said, he went to the VA that day. He talked to me, and when he called me and said, what do I do? How do I, how do I move on? And so I talked to him. And once I could hear that his breathing was more stable and he was able to like crack a joke, I said, baby, I said, I need you to do me a favor. He said, what? I said, I need you to call your therapist. I said, I need you to call your therapist right now. And he said, okay. I said, because I need you to see somebody. I said, because I said, I can leave work and I can come and be with you. I said, but even if I come to you, I'm taking you to the VA. I said, because you need to talk to someone. I said, because there are just some things that we can't work through ourselves. And I said, and as much as I love you and as much as I want to take your pain from you, I can't get you through this. I may be able to talk you through this moment, but for you to be asking the questions that you're asking me and making the comments that you're making, you need professional help. I need you.
And I'm glad that you saw that, we as parents, we would move the entire earth.
Yes.
And move it so we can help our children. And I'm glad that you understood that no matter what it is that you are doing, sometimes us finding someone else to step in is all that we can do for our children or our loved one on a whole. It doesn't have to be our kids. Pastor Kimberly, I was asking with regards to your parents, did you have that hard discussion as to what's next and how to plan?
Yes, I did. My parents were sick for a number of years, about 4 years, but my dad was very proactive and he was a very organized person. So we were in conversations together before I wanted to be. He was talking to me, I would say a few months before he passed away, and he was saying, I need you to sign the paperwork and the documents so that when I pass, things will be turned over to you so you can pay my bills, pay for my funeral, and handle all my stuff. So we went to the bank and we got those things signed, the power of attorney, those paperworks that we needed in order for that to happen very, very smoothly. And I was like, Daddy, I really wasn't ready myself. I was like, Daddy, why are you doing all this? He said, because, Kimmy, I have 4 kids. I love all 4 kids. But I know my 4 kids. And I know that if you don't get this done, you're going to have some problems. You really are. So I had to be real about Daddy knew what he was talking about. I didn't see it. I didn't see the urgency. It just made it too real for me. But I was very obedient. And I say that to anybody now. When he did pass away, things were so smooth. I still got accused of all kinds of terrible things, as usually the person in charge does. But it was no way that anybody could prove anything because my dad had prepared everything. Every document was in place. So I was able to, appreciate that after the fact. So I would say if I were anyone, even my small kids have insurance policies, but get prepared because it's a stressful situation enough to lose somebody. And whenever somebody wants to talk to you about it, young or old, I agree with Dawn. Have that conversation because we don't know. Our days are numbered and we don't know who's going to go first. So it was tough because I didn't want to accept it because that made it real, right? And then, with my mom, she started talking to me about the songs that she wanted sang at her funeral. So, I'm like, geez, what gives here? Daddy just passed away and now you're talking about this? So, but I understood from him that I needed to get prepared. And so we had the conversations, the service that she wanted, how she wanted it to be. And no, it wasn't easy for me, but you have to get past that selfishness of yourself when that person or people want to talk to you about these things. And so in turn, I learned, and I suggest everybody listening do this as well. Talk to your kids. Now, my kids are only 15 and 16 years old. I've talked to them. They know where the insurance papers are. They know what I want. They know I don't want to be putting a bunch of money in the ground. They know I want to be cremated, right? But I've already written the instruction out. I may go first. They may go first. I don't know. But the main thing, they didn't want to have a conversation either, but they were so open because I didn't act freaky and weird about it. I was like, I just want you to know what to do because you're going to be upset no matter what age you are. But at least if you know what to do, you got to be prepared. So everybody get prepared, please.
Yes.
And one term that you use about being selfish. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we are, but it's not the selfish that we want everything for ourselves. We're selfish because we don't want to deal with the inevitable. We don't want to deal with the journey that's a part of life, actually. We don't want to
Mm-hmm.
deal with that one part of life that is conclusive, and that's it. But you're right
Yes.
that this is a hard conversation that needs to be had. And
Mhm.
Don, I mean, every time I know the story, and I'm so glad that you're here and being transparent and open about your loss and how your loss took place, because you are definitely helping and healing so many people.
Absolutely.
So
May
many.
I add something to that?
Of course.
Okay. The one blessing in having these conversations is if you were taking that person for granted, if you were
Yes.
not really tending to their needs or visiting or calling, and this is Don is the exception, of course. I'm not speaking of that. I'm speaking of us in general, because you have to have when you have that conversation, it's a gift because you realize, wow, this is
Yes.
temporary and I'm going to act better. I'm going to treat them better. I'm going to talk to them nicer. I'm going to enjoy the moments that I have because I'm not going to always have these moments. After you have a conversation, you realize, wow, I need to really work on this relationship. I need to really do everything I can. I pulled out all the stops for my parents. There was absolutely, literally nothing else that I could do. My father even said before he died, "You are unusual. You've done everything. We don't expect that. This is just unusual." I was like, "But I love you, Daddy." But what I had was the reality that my daddy wasn't going to be there forever. And so I have to act as though, my best behavior, my best that I could give him. So why? So I don't live in regret, because you guys know you seen the people that try to climb over in the casket and wail, and those are usually the people that didn't do anything. Normally, they didn't do anything because they are just it's just now hitting them. That's why they act like that. But once we acknowledge and have that conversation, it for me it changed the dynamic, and I became a lot more involved and more grateful for my parents.
So Don, so I know that you did everything that you were supposed to do, and I admire you that
Thank
you realized, okay, this is my son, and I can't help him, and I know that was a help. You felt extremely helpless. Can you talk about those feelings for you?
Feeling of helplessness.
Yeah, of helplessness when you're trying to do everything. Yes, the feelings of helplessness.
Yes. So, in actuality, I'll share this with you because one of the questions you asked me earlier was, were there signs? I believe my son was waiting until he knew that both my daughter and I were in a good place. Because the year prior, like I said, I went through a divorce. But they watched me. They watched the total transformation that took place from who I was before the marriage, who I was during the marriage. And my son straight out told me, I have to take a break. I have to step back and take a break from you. He said, because I don't like who you've become. He said, you've lost yourself, you have forgotten who you are, and you have allowed this person to belittle and demean you and make you forget who you are. And I need you to figure that out.
Can we expound about that and talk about some of the emotions that you went through in that relationship? I don't want to say toxic. I think that's what you should say.
Well, it was emotionally abusive. I was under someone's thumb. I ended up I got married and I left my job, I left my career, became a full-time homemaker, and that that person basically made it so that he was my everything, everything. So I lost me. I lost who I was because I had to bend myself to be that. He controlled everything, the money, healthcare, everything, and part of it is on me too, because I lost who I was, and I made my self-worth be about what someone else thought about me. I had forgotten who I was, and I could not define myself other than saying I was a wife, I was a mother, I was a daughter, I was a sister. I couldn't tell you who Dawn was. I defined myself by those,
By actions.
yes, by those titles. And so I completely gave myself to this person to the point where I lost who I was. So I made it easy for him to just control every area of my life. I made it easy for him. And it was when I started taking back my power that the relationship broke down, because he was a narcissistic person. He was a narcissistic person. So in a way, yes, he was responsible for his actions, but at the same time, he was a very narcissistic person, and I was the passive person that sat back and let stuff happen to me. And so when my son told me that, it shocked me, and it hurt. It hurt, because he was like, you're smart, you're intelligent, you're educated, you're well-rounded, you're loved. Like, you have no idea how much you mean to so many people, and you have minimized yourself to the point where, he says, I can't. He said, you always tell me help you. He said, well, mama, I need you to help me help you. He said, because I can't kill him, and I can't stay and watch you diminish to nothing. He said, so he stepped back, and we spoke, but we went through about a year where we really didn't have any communication. And, I went into therapy. He did not want to do individual therapy, because I said we need individual therapy and we need couples therapy. But I knew that it did not make sense to just do couples therapy if we weren't willing to work on our own stuff individually. And he wouldn't do it, because I can remember he told me about a time where he went into therapy in a previous relationship, and he bragged about the fact that it was her therapist, but by the time they were done, he was the favorite, and the therapist told him that he was the favorite. So it was like, it was a competition. So I knew, I was like, no. We're not doing just couples. We're doing individual. And he lied about it. He told me that he was going to a therapist. And when I started asking him questions, he couldn't answer them. And so then I said, well, who's your therapist, and when do you go to therapy? Because he worked from home and he never left home. So I was like, is it remote? Like, how is this? When he finally said, I'm not going to anybody yet. And I said, well, but you told me that you were seeing somebody, that you were going. And he was like, yeah, but I don't like him. And so I'm just going to try to find somebody else. This happened 2 or 3 different times. So, at some point, you got to realize that it's not the therapist, but maybe it's you that's the problem. And, my doctor, because I'm seeing a therapist, she made me go and see a therapist. And I will never forget the day I was on blood pressure medication, and my blood pressure was still high while I was on the medication. And she literally closed her book, and she leaned over and she looked me dead in my face, and she said, at this point, Dawn, I've been following you for about a year. And she says, and take this how you take it, but you can either leave or let him kill you. And I just looked and I thought,
Well, I am glad that Caleb said what he said so he can save your life.
He said what he said. And so what happened is, so I ended up being divorced. He moved out, he did his thing. It was about a period of a year. In that year, I started working in a new position. I was going to therapy, and we started having mother-son days. Like, he would come to me, but I would mostly go to him because he couldn't drive long distances. And we would go and we would have dinner together. We would go to the movies together. Whenever my daughter was in town, he would come and stay, and the three of us would be together, and we would spend like extended weekends together. And it was during those times that we really started talking
And
about
reconnecting.
relationships, and the fact that, you know, when you get into a relationship, when you marry, the two become one. But you still have to know who you are as an individual. You have to be a secure, stable individual when you go into that relationship. And you need to be open and honest about who you are when you enter into the relationship, because the worst thing that you could do is change yourself to try to fit someone else's perception or what that person is wanting from you. And then you get in a marriage, and then over time, that wall comes down, and now the real you has emerged, but you're not the you that they married. And then that becomes an issue. So we had conversations about being true to who you are, knowing who you are, being able to say the things that you want, the things that you don't want, the things that you will compromise on, the things that you won't compromise on. We talked about the need to get mental health assistance. That it's important to have a therapist. It's important to check in regularly, because if you think about it, we will go to the doctor every year to get annual checkups. We will go to the dentist every 6 months to get checkups on our teeth. Our brain, our heart, they need to be checked up on as well. So we had these discussions.
Great. That is wonderful. And Kimberly, I want to bring you into the conversation. I know that during that time that you lost both of your parents, you two went through a divorce. And I know that it was hard for you because, well, tell us about it, the divorce and moving and shifting and dealing with your parents. Tell us about some of the emotional challenges that you went through.
Oh, okay. I think initially you had asked how we notice the breakdown, or when did we notice the breakdown? And I want to take us back real quickly to where I noticed the breakdown. When we, it was everything was sunshine and roses in the beginning, but I noticed about year number 4, the life that we were living without kids was the life that he wanted to continue to live, right? So I thought, but he never told me this. I thought when you had kids, you naturally just kind of, come in and do the, white picket fence in the house, and the dog and all those things that I had experienced in my mind, right? But I noticed that it wasn't that way for him, and neither should it have been, because that wasn't his conviction, right? It wasn't apparently the message that he got as a man. So I noticed about year number 4 or 5, that we were not on the same page, because I wanted to just go home after work and be with my kids and hug on my babies and love on my babies, and he still wanted to go have a little drink after work, or go to the gym, or do whatever kind of tennis or whatever kind of fun things that he did before we had kids. So it was about that time I realized, I think we got a little bit of a conflict here, right? When that happened, I think what I had to realize was, okay, so if this doesn't change, because nobody told you he would, you didn't talk about it before, he's operating the way he operates, you're operating the way you operate. Is anybody wrong? Not necessarily. All right. Wrong is relative when you talk about two people and how they express and think family should be. So I had to come to grips with this is probably not going to stop. This is probably always going to be an issue for us. So, and I did the same thing everybody does. They try to have the talks and convince him and say, hey, I think you should do it this way, or I think we should be on this track. And he would, give me his input. So it wasn't ever an agreement from that point on, right? But like a lot of us, I stayed in it. I kept trying to bend myself, like Dawn said. I kept trying to bend myself, lower my expectation, and survive in the marriage because that's what I would have to do, right? And again, it is not his fault. It is not my fault. We just had a whole different mindset and interpretation of what it was going to look like, right? So as time moved on and we grew further apart, I had to come to grips with the fact that, you know what? I don't like this. I don't want to do this, but I'm probably going to have to be a single mother. So about year number 6, that's when I started to, prepare and start to be okay with doing everything by myself, with, having the relationship with the kids, trying to cultivate them as the three of us being their norm, because I fought it for a long time because my parents, we grew up together, right, in the same household. And I didn't want that for them. So I fought it for a long time, but finally I had to surrender and realize maybe this is the best thing. Maybe this marriage was just so we could have these amazing children. Maybe this marriage was so I could get, some reality check because I'm living in a lollipop world. And I had to come to grips because one thing he didn't let me remain in a lollipop space. He always brought the cold hard facts. And that was his contribution to my growth. So he wasn't a low down, dirty, blah, blah, blah. No, he brought something that I needed. Okay. So now being in that space and that mindset, realizing, you know what, it was just something where we had our wires crossed and it's probably time for it to end because it's on its way. Right. So I held on and I held on and held on and held on and held on. And it never changed. And that's what I'm letting people know right now. It won't change. Once you hit that brick hard surface and the two of you are in different mind frames,
Yes.
don't worry about it. Get out of it because you're not going to suddenly morph into individuals of the same mind. Okay. But what does that mean? Get out of it. You talk to that person in a way where he's not the fault. He's not the bad guy. It's like, look, this just doesn't work anymore. We're a square peg trying to fit in a round hole. Not your fault, not my fault. Whatever you do on your free time, that's your business. But I know that doesn't have anything to do with me. That's because that's what you want to do. So when you realize this is not personal, this is just the person expressing themselves, you come into an acceptance. And then you're able to move forward because you're no longer a victim. So that as we move down that road of divorce, because we lived separately for a number of years and we tried to bring it back together, same issues, same friction. It was just God saying, baby girl, it's time to let this go. This has served its purpose and I'm proud of you for trying, but it's time because I've got to move in your life in another way. So I accepted that. And so by the time we got to the divorce, I was not as floored and upset. And just as much like Dawn, I asked the children because I told them, I said, Daddy and I are going to change our relationship. We're just going to be, great parents and somewhat friends. And my son said, oh, so you're friend zoning dad. I said, yes, I am friend zoning dad. There is nothing horrible about your dad. He's still your dad. We just don't fit anymore. So we're going to be friends. So I'm friend zoning. But the interesting thing my daughter said, much like what Dawn's son said, she said, oh, Mom, about time. I love my daddy. I love my daddy. But you're just like a housewife. You're just like a plain old quiet housewife when you're a dad. You don't have any shine. Now,
Well,
I
out of the
realized.
mouth of babes. One thing I will say about you two gems, you ladies, and as you were going through, you did the work to deal with self. You did the work to
Self.
realize that I'm not putting all the blame on the partner. I
No.
realize that I'm here too, and it's a two-way street, and that shows growth. It shows strength, and you can't go anywhere but forward because too many times sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
because we're in relationships that we don't like, we spend too much time talking about what was wrong with the other person instead of acknowledging that the part that was played by you. And I admire both of you for saying just that. And that I admire your strength for being here, being so transparent, because I know these topics are hard. I know this conversation is hard, and loss is not easy. No type of loss. And as you guys went through the loss of loved ones, the loss of death, what what have you guys done? Let me start with you, Pastor Kimberly, in honoring your parents. I know how many years it's been. 2021, you said.
It's been 3 years.
So,
Yeah,
what are some of the
3 years.
activities, or if any, anything that you've done to honor them since they left us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I had a box of my dad's ties, right? His neckties that he had, as he was a deacon in the church and always going to church. So as a form of keeping his memory in everybody's minds, whenever my cousins or we get together, if it's a birthday or a holiday, I give them a tie from my dad's collection, right? So that kind of keeps them in the mind frame of him, and it makes me feel really good because it's like part of his legacy, a part of him is going on and on and on forever. And so that material thing helped me so very much. And then I realized that, my daddy was here and he was here for me for the amount of time that he was supposed to be here. But the main thing that I can keep, because now I have sad days now, don't get me wrong. I still cry 3 years later. I might cry forever. I don't know. But that's okay. That's okay. I love my daddy. I had 55 years with my daddy. So it's going to probably take another 55 to get over. So that I have to embrace and allow myself to feel those feelings, because I can't pretend wasn't special. But then I also think about the funny stuff that he used to tell me, right? And the jokes and the crazy little corny jokes that he used to tell me. And I allow my mind as moving on to run out through the gamut of memories and the great times. And then I realized when daddy left, it was God's doing for daddy to leave. Whatever way you leave this earth, I believe, whatever way you leave this earth, and please hear me, everybody, it is the time that God ordained for you to go, because you can't outdo God. However you left here, all right? It was time. So I had to understand I'm not going to fight against God's will by being upset anymore. I'm sad because I miss my dad, but it was time. Because guess what? He wasn't going to get any better. And did I really want to see him in a more declining state? No. So that helped me. And like I said, you don't ever get over that pain, that hurt is there. But you do have understanding, which helps you to cope. And the same situation with my mommy. She was so prissy and pristine, and I have her jewelry actually that I'm wearing. So those are things that I have with her. And Camilla, as you know, I caught so much terrible grief from family members being materialistic that I didn't have a chance to really grieve my mama, right? Because I was fighting the battle of get off me and don't accuse me of those things, right? But when I do get to sit down and have a good cry about her, I laugh at the fact that how funny and pristine that she was. But also, when I look at myself in the mirror and my body, I see her. And that helps me because she's still with me, right? And there again, I would have kept her here forever if it was up to me. And she probably would have wound up on life support, right? If it was up to me. But that wouldn't be fair to her. It was God's time. He said, perfect, everything is done. I want her with me. And yes, I'm sad about it because I miss her, but we have to realize she wasn't going to get better. And it was God's will that she be with him and comfortable. So that's how I have to continually, and it ain't just a one-stop shop, daily, honey, weekly.
Yes. It definitely moment by moment. It's not a daily thing. It's a moment by moment.
Exactly.
And how are some of the ways that you're honoring Caleb?
So many. So many ways. So I have this pendant is actually his thumbprint.
Oh,
The funeral home did that for us. And so he was my hero. He was my hero. I called him my hero from, I think, 5 years of age. So it wasn't like, military related. He was my hero. That was one of his many nicknames. I also got a tattoo that says hero. Um, and I have his flag on my mantle above my fireplace. And also in my home, actually right behind me, I have a bookshelf. And on his bookshelf, I have his military picture. I have some of his favorite books. I have those. I have the awards that he received from the military. I have his coins to keep that in the home. Um, Also, he bought his car. It was the first car. He had a car given to him by his father, but he bought a car that he wanted. He researched about. He loved this vehicle, and when he passed, I bought the car. I sold mine, and so I have his car. And I think one of the most important things that I do to honor him, I talk about him all the time. I speak with other people who have suffered loss, mothers, fathers. I speak with them, and I'm very open and honest about the challenges that he went through, um, because I feel like the best way to honor him is to be honest
Yes.
and not to sugarcoat it and like, oh, he was happy and this came out of the blue and we don't know what happened. No, he struggled and he fought it. He fought it for years. Um, I just think, like Kimberly said, his assignment was done. He had done what it was that he was supposed to do. I had strangers come up to me and thank me. And I'm like, why are you thanking me? And it's like, because you raised him. You brought him in this world, you raised him, and he was an amazing individual. And it's because of him that I'm still alive today. So I've had people tell me that he saved their lives. But also to go back and touch on what Kimberly said too about my other loss, the marriage. That was actually my second marriage. Um, and yes, I mentioned, the fact that the individual was narcissistic, but that's a personality trait because I was the caregiver. I was the giver, 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 giver. That was his personality. That was his personality. That was the way he was raised. That's what he was taught. And I didn't pay attention to the warning signs ahead of time. They were there. I didn't see them because I had made out
So you didn't want to see them.
what I needed him to be. So I didn't pay attention to the warning signs. But the marriage was also a blessing because, yes, I left my career and that was difficult to do. But I also was blessed to be at home. And what I ended up doing was I did have the freedom in my marriage to be the volunteer that I was. I made volunteering my full-time job. So I became the soccer mom, the football mom, the theater mom, the army mom, the everything mom. I adopted 100 other children, that call me mama. And I
And
love,
you were there with your kids every step of the
and I
way.
was with my kids every step of the way. I went over this in my head just the other day. I remember thinking when I came off my job, my daughter was going into first grade. And I remembered I had a conversation with my son, I think he was in high school. And I said, you know what? I'm so sorry because I feel like when Jay goes back and thinks about school, she will never be able to remember not having me around. I said, but you were like, you
That's
were
a
in the third
blessing.
grade. I said, you were in the third grade going into the fourth grade. So you lost some years and I'm sorry. And he looked at me, he was like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you were older when I came home. And he says, but you know what I remember? I said, what? He said, you never missed one award banquet. You never missed a field trip. He said, my teachers used to send work home for you and you did it and then sent it back with me. He says, Mom, you were the room mom and you were working full time. He said, so I didn't miss anything. So for me, while the 15 years that I was in that marriage, were difficult and there were some beautiful things to come out of
Yes.
it because If anyone had told me I was only going to have my son for 24 years, I would have said, you a lie. No, no. There's no way that I would have prepared I was like, no, I would have absolutely been in denial. But I had the relationship that I had with my son because of the time that I was able to spend with him.
Yes.
So a lot of times when we look at grief, at loss, it is a horrible thing. I've heard it said that loss, that I had to write it down. Grief is like having a hole ripped through the very fiber of your being. It changes you forever, forever. But I also heard, this came from Claire Bidwell Smith, who's a licensed clinical practitioner. She said, according to brain scientists, grieving is actually a form of learning. Our grief is teaching us how to be in the world without our person.
Yes.
So even though it can be a very trying thing, a very difficult thing, it can also be a very beautiful thing in the sense that even though our person has been taken from this world, in my case, my son is no longer in pain. He's no longer suffering. He's no longer questioning his faith. I know who he's with. I know he's with God. I know he's in heaven. And I know that we'll be, reunited again. And I can feel good about that. I don't have to worry about him anymore because I worried all of the time. Is he okay? How is he feeling? Is he in pain? What can I do? How can I make it better? And knowing that I couldn't make it better, that I couldn't take his pain, that was almost as suffocating as not having him to talk to every single day. It can be almost, because in a way you kind of lose them before they're gone. And in some ways
that was a part of the helplessness feeling.
Yes, and that was part of the helplessness, is that while he was going through his suffering, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make it go away. And as a parent, that is the most helpless thing you could ever go through. I couldn't make it better. He'd call me crying and I could make it better in that moment. He knew that he wasn't alone. He knew that he had me, but it wasn't going to change it. So yeah, so when one of my ways to honor him is I'm going to do my best to reach as many people as I can, to express the importance of taking care of our mental health, because for so long, there was no such thing as mental health awareness. That was something that, that was taboo. We didn't talk about it. You don't do your dirty laundry in public. You keep that. What goes on in my house stays in my house. Well, that doesn't work. That's killing us. Yes. We have to discuss it. We have to get help. We have to get help, because it's just, even when we're feeling good, it's a checkup thing. I think it's something that we just need to do. We need to check up our mental health just like we do our physical health.
I agree. And that was actually my Let's Talk minute last Wednesday. You have to make our mental. I know that May was Mental Health Awareness Month, but every day is Mental Health Awareness Day, because we go through things every single day. Just life surely is lifing a lot of time.
Absolutely.
And it becomes difficult. And I am so glad that you ladies can come and share and be open and transparent, because I know it's hard and it can be heavy. Oh, kudos. And thank you so much for coming back again right away. But before we go on to the next, what is your next? I know that you've been honoring your loved one. I know part of your journey, both of you, is helping others that have suffered, and even those that may not have and may have similar signs. So you're being transparent and letting everyone know your story. But what's next? Let's start with you, Kimberly.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, okay. My immediate next, and I have to break it down, is because I have in front of me two teenagers that have to be raised for of the next 2 years, and then they'll be moving out of the nest and going on and building up their lives. So right now, my energies, my next right now is putting all my effort into making sure they're okay mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I want them to, have uh, conversations. I'm having deep conversations with them just about life. I'm sharing in the entertaining things that they enjoy doing. And we're making some milestones. We're learning how to drive, and I'm just focused right now on being present for them, because there again, I want no regrets. When they leave this house, they're free to do whatever they want to do. But right now, I'm focused on not having to say, well, maybe I should have told them this, maybe I missed that, maybe I should have told them that. I won't get it right every time, right? I won't be perfect. But right now, I'm just trying to stay focused on them so that there are no regrets. And I think my life living for the past probably 15 years have been because of the fact that life changes, kids leave the nest, parents pass away. I'm focused on doing everything I can do right now to have no regrets regarding raising those two children. Now, when they are gone, I'm going to start dating. I'm
Yes.
going to start traveling. I may dye my hair. I may change my job. I'm going to probably do a little acting, pursue a little acting, because that's something I've always wanted to do. Just everything that I have not done for whatever reason, circumstance, situation, now that it's all going to be gone, I'm going to get back in touch with the creator and start pursuing those things that I enjoy. And as Dawn knows, we know we're fabulous. And you, Camilla, we're fabulous. So there's someone who's wanting a beautiful, seasoned, mind strong, but humble, feminine woman. And because God said it's not good for us to be alone, I'm going to fully open up myself to that in my chapter 2. And
Amen.
I think with that being said, we get this chapter 2 in life. So we need to maximize it. And don't worry about what everybody else says, because if everybody else was you, they would do what you doing too. Okay? You want
Exactly.
to wear your short skirt, you want to wear your big hair, you want to drive your convertible, you do it. And that's what I'm going to enjoy myself and do. And of course, be available to those who need me. But I'm going to be first, because
Good
I
for you.
cannot give and I
You
cannot
sound
be
like
a benefit
everybody.
if I'm putting myself last. Okay? So that's my next.
Amen. What about you, Don?
I agree with Kimberly. I'm putting myself first. So
Yes, ma'am.
I I walked away from my career, like I said, like 15, 16 years ago, and I'm re-entering the mental health field. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to be doing or what that's going to look like, but that's what I'm doing. Um, I'm using this as my platform to speak, to just speak, and to be a witness to it all, and to support, to guide, to help heal in whatever way that I can. I've also been traveling. And I have reconnected with my sorority because I love my sisterhood.
One of your sorors said, "We're here for you, Don."
Oh yeah, oh I love it. I love them. I love them, and it's I mean it's service to all mankind for forever. So I just love that I get to come back and that I just get to pick up where I left off and keep moving. That keeps me busy. It keeps me focused. It helps to give me a purpose. I'm very involved at my church. I love my church family, and that has also been very important. I've been blessed to spend a lot of time with my daughter, and that also is changing because she just graduated from college. So now
Congratulations.
she's beginning her life, and so I'm just taking time to do like my son said and find me, figure out who I am, who is Dawn to Dawn, not the Dawn that is everybody else's, but who is Dawn for Dawn. And I'm finding that out, and I'm loving it. I want to write because there's so much going on in my head that I feel like I need to just put it down on paper, and I have to say that to you all publicly, because then you have
We're
to.
holding you accountable.
I'm allowing myself to be held accountable. So I thank you.
Well, I mean, thank you, ladies. And one thing that I want to piggyback on what both of you said about um, both your parents living their full life and Caleb living their full life. I lost a nephew last year, and my great nephew. And one thing the pastor said, and that really stood with me because he was young, very young. And he said, even though he is so young, he lived his full life. And
Yes.
only God knows what your full life is. And that just spoke volumes. And as you ladies said what you said, I was like, yes, that's a full life. We can say that was too short or they did that, but your full life is just your full life. And speaking about that, this conversation was so full. It was full of transparency. I was hurt. I was emotional. I'm grateful. I am grateful. I am grateful that you ladies said yes again. And I want to thank my audience for wanting to know what does that loss mean and what your next is. Because you, as you go through, there is no end as to when you stop grieving. But life doesn't stop until it stops. So continue living, find a hobby, go start writing, start traveling, start, you know, working on yourself, doing your hair, everything that these ladies said, because even though you go through loss, life still goes on, and loss is a part of life and what our everyday living. So if you want to be reach out to Don or Pastor Kimberly, just write a message and let's talk about you, and they will definitely reach out to you in any way or form. They're on the journey of healing each themselves as well as healing us, and we're in this together. We're all lifing together. So let's be good to each other. Let's help one another. Let's continue loving on one another. And most importantly, let's stay blessed on purpose. I want to say thank you, Don. Thank you, Kimberly, for coming back and coming back so soon. And you know you're going to be coming back again. I want to say thank you to my producers, Kiana and Crystal. I want to say thank you to Kiki Creations and Infinitely Me for being our sponsors. I want to say thank you for all of you for just loving on me on this platform, and let's talk about you. So have a phenomenal week. Our next show will be on Father's Day, and I'm excited about that because we're actually going to have a male panel. I haven't done that before, so I'm excited to see what our men have to offer and all they have to say. So make sure you guys tune in on Father's Day. I know it's Father's Day, but we have some great men that have words of wisdom, and just we're going to have a great time talking to them. So you guys have a phenomenal week. Stay blessed on purpose, and thank you for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.